Come on, Blues. Come on, you Blue boys. Aye, come on. That's me every Saturday shouting that top of my voice. Although I don't know why I bother, we always lose. I can't remember the last time we got a point. It's not surprising really though, is it, with our owners? They couldn't give a rat's backside about us. The stadium's falling down, but we don't even own the bugger. It's a shame, we used to have such a brilliant side going back down at Blues. Lots of Archie Gemmell, Kenny Burns, Joe Gallagher, Colin Todd, Trevor Francis. What a player he was. And managers, well, I done Barry Fry back in heartbeat. It's not the players' fault, they try hard enough. But I've got pants older than our entire midfield. And our forward line's so old, it's got the combined age of a velociraptor. They say you're born into your team, don't they? I wish I'd been born a Man United fan, or Liverpool, or Chelsea. Anyone but Blues. Well, not Villa, obviously. That'd be worse than being born without testicles, but you get the gist. Oh, where did it all go wrong?
Football in this country started in the 1800s, 1863, Notts County and Stoke. It very much was a northern game. And Birmingham, similar, I think Birmingham come from the Holy Trinity, didn't they, that church? But football really grew out of cricket because they were playing cricket in the summer and wanted something to do in the winter. And football was a pastime that was just starting in this country. I guess they just got a number of kids together and started kicking a bit of pigskin around inflated.
So Blues were also formed by crickets.
I think you'll find that most football clubs, and I don't know because I haven't looked into it. There's some great books that you can read about the history of all football clubs, but it mainly come out of either cricket clubs or the church, because they were two establishments that were, long-standing. Jesus invented the church, didn't he?
He did,
2,000 years ago and 20. Yeah, do you remember that one we done about when she'd come on a donkey?
I'll cut that bit out. So, biggest disappointment as a Blues fan?
The biggest disappointment for me was actually not being at the final against Arsenal. So that's a personal disappointment for me. I wasn't able to get there. I wasn't able to secure a ticket, and missing what was probably the biggest single achievement in my lifetime as a Blues fan was a massive disappointment personally. I think as far as the club's concerned and disappointment on the field, I think some of those playoff losses, certainly against Preston, I remember being at St Andrews for the Barnsley game when I think we lost the first leg 4-0 or 4-1. It's typical Blues, isn't it? They raise your expectations. You stood there, the whistle goes, everything is possible. And then 90 minutes later, the rug's just pulled away from you.
Typical Blues is a phrase that comes up so often, and it's so apt. Yeah.
I think it's got to be the way the fans can be one moment on top of everything, really happy, supporting, and then the minute that something goes wrong, it's as though the world's come to an end. People then just start turning on each other, and rather than supporting and helping, it makes it worse.
Well, being a Blues fan, we've had quite a few over the years, and it's hard to pinpoint just one. For me, I'd say a massive disappointment was not building on that Carling Cup win. I think seeing that team of absolute legends being dismantled in the way they were, every other day they were all leaving. So for me, in my 46 years of being around, it's got to be the breakup of that Carling Cup team. I think if we'd have kept that team together, and we had, don't forget we had Europe the next season, we could have gone on to achieve, who knows? We could have had another Wembley trip. So that's just one of many, and that's one that sort of sticks in my head from recent years.
Biggest disappointment has got to be Zola. The biggest disappointment is we're a big name from a big city, and we should be better than what we are or what we were. And I think going back to the 1970s and late 60s when I started going, the enthusiasm from managers there, Stan Cullis and Freddie Goodwin and I don't know, all those people. It was just a different atmosphere to what it is now.
And so all things going, they went and changed the name again from Small Heath.
Well, they were formed as Small Heath Alliance back then. Yeah. I think they played the early games off the top of my head. We played in Arthur Street. We played Ladypool Road, played in Munt Street, and then moved to St Andrews in 1905, I believe, where they booted a load of gypsies off the pitch. I mean, it wasn't the pitch in them days, of course. There was nothing there. I think there was, I always get this word wrong, is it an artesian well? And that's why the gypsies used to stop off and congregate round there. And one of the directors of Birmingham City noticed this land and thought, you know what, this is a good spot for a football ground. And of course, famously, the gypsies cursed Birmingham City when they booted them off. But again, a long time ago, it is folklore. Whether it happened or not, who knows? But, it's a bit like the Loch Ness Monster, in it, and everything else.
We'll come to the efforts of getting rid of that curse probably a bit later. But changed from Small Heath Alliance to Birmingham 1905.
Yeah, they never added the city. They never added the city till after the war. I think it was 1945 or 1946 when they added city to the name. In fact, the first club to add city to the name, I believe, is Lincoln.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
I believe that to be true. The oldest city is, of course, Stoke City in 1863, but I think it's Lincoln City that was the first city. But yeah, Birmingham City were born after the war. Small Heath Alliance changed to Birmingham. I don't think they asked permission to be called Birmingham City, but they just took the name and then added city to Birmingham's name after it.
It's a pretty good move, that was, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, it was really going from Small Heath to the whole of Birmingham.
Yeah. I'm just reading that during the war, the ground was used for as a rifle range, and that's something.
It was also used. Yeah, it was used by the fire brigade as well. And famously, didn't they burn the main stand down? I think a cigarette stub was put out with petrol. And that's not a good combination. No. And I think as a result, the whole stand went up in flames.
Oh, right. I thought that was...
I believe so.
Oh, right, it wasn't bombed then, it was an accident.
No, I'm not sure whether Birmingham St Andrews got bombed. I mean, you hear the rumours that they did get bombed and caused a lot of improvements to the ground. Yeah. But again, I don't know whether that's true or not. But yeah, the Germans and Birmingham and Munt Street probably got it a couple of times. I mean, pointless bombing Ladypool Road and Arthur Street. We'd long gone from there, of course. Our first dwelling. 31 when we played West Bromwich Albion in the final. Yeah, in fact, when I did an interview with Jeremy Peace, he took me up into the boardroom and says, W.G. Richardson, I think it was the fella that scored the 2 goals that day for the Baggies, and says, Gabbie, there's his boots. I said, thank you for that, Jeremy. He's very kind. But Joe Bradford scored the goal for Birmingham that day. Yeah. And then obviously in 56. I guess really you could argue that the German invasion of Poland had a lot to do with Birmingham City not winning the cup that day, because of course Bert Trautmann, the prisoner of war, and a member of the Hitler Youth, played in goal, broke his neck, played a blinder, and Manchester City ran out 3-1 winners. Noel Kinsey scored the goal for Birmingham that day. And of course, Don Revie played as a deep-lying centre forward. It was known as the Revie plan. It's something that's been adopted these days, dressed up in new paper, and coaches claim that they've just invented it. But no, there is evidence that football did begin in the 1800s, not 1992.
Your earliest recollection going to St Andrews?
I will never forget my first game. First game on my own, that is. It was Stoke at home when unfortunately there was trouble at the stadium. So I had petrified parents because there were not mobile phones about at the time to check on how I was.
My earliest recollection, well, for me, I mean, I was born in Harborne. I moved to Coventry 2006, but my mum and dad had two sets of twins, and me and Steve are the eldest. We're both 46. And I always remember my first trip, it would have been about 1981. The old main stand, Dad taking me and Steve, and just being in that main stand, being at pitch level, seeing the players who were like giants. I remember we played Stoke, and I remember George Berry. I don't know if you remember him with his
George Berry, yeah, big hair.
Big hair. I remember seeing him. He stood out. Can't remember much about the actual game. I believe we won 2-0. And I'll always remember, I don't know why I remember this, but because we've always had a mad crowd of Blues, I just remember this one guy, big sort of meatloaf lookalike, with a beard by the main stand, just by the dugout. And he was singing, he had like a cowbell. And all I remember, he was going like, tinker, tinker, tinker. And I don't know why, it was just stuck in my head. And that's my first memory of going down the Blues.
Yes, very first game, we lost to Man City. We went 1-0 up through a Ricky Sbriglia penalty, and lost 4-1. But I was still hooked. Mum had let my uncles take me, because I had no way of getting there by myself. 3 older sisters who hadn't got any interest in football and stuff, so no one would have gone with me otherwise. But stood outside the Garrison pub while my uncles met up with their friends. Bag of crisps and a bottle of Coke as waited outside for them. And then I can remember the walk up from the Garrison, approaching the ground, going through the turnstiles, walking up the embankment, with actually a staircase, isn't it? But obviously, the back of the Kop, going over the Brow, and then the smell of Bovril, smell of the toilets, walking down, and just like the sheer awe of what I'd walked into, and then when the noise kicked off with the singing, then obviously when we went that 1-0 up, the surge up and down the terrace, ending up 30 feet away from where you were, and then going back to the disappointment side of it, obviously walking away with a defeat, but I was hooked from that moment.
Absolutely,
was 56? 56 was when Keep Right On was first introduced. It was. It was
on the way. I believe it was I think they played the semi-final against Sunderland.
Sunderland, yeah.
I think they played Sunderland in both semi-finals, if memory serves me right. And it was due. Yeah, well, just looking through the old annuals of yesteryear, but that was many years ago when I used to read all this history. But the story goes that the players were singing songs, and Len Boyd was any old iron and singing some songs from back in old London town. And Arthur Turner, the manager, turned round to Alex Govan and said, "Alex, let's have one from Scotland." And he started singing, "Oh, the way belong, let your heart be strong." And Alex Govan gave Birmingham City that anthem. But Preston North End did sing it in the 30s when they won the FA Cup in 1938. I think they had 8 Scottish players that played for them, one being Bill Shankly. And as they were coming into the old square, the crowd were singing "Keep Right On" to the end of the road. I can only assume that 12 months after, the Second World War broke out and the song at Preston North End died. But in 56, Birmingham City adopted that thanks to Alex Govan. It was Harry Lauder that wrote the song, and he wrote it in memory of his son, I believe was a corporal in the British Army that died in the Battle of Somme. And it's an anthemic Second World War song about, Second World War song about going over the top in the trenches, and when you be tired and weary, you still carry on. I mean, there's a couple of verses to that, but Birmingham City just tend to focus on the first verse and keep repeating it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we do, don't we? It depends if you're winning or losing. I mean, back in the day, in the 70s, let's go back to the 70s, or let's go fast forward to the 70s, they used to sing it really, really slow.
They did, yeah. They did, right up to early 90s.
And that really put the hairs on the back of your neck standing up when they sang it really slowly.
The last time I heard it sung slowly was probably the 91 Wembley. Leyland Duff, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
That was, as you say, like when it's sung properly, it does make the hairs on the back of your hand stand up.
Absolutely. And of course, back in the 70s, we used to sing You'll Never Walk Alone. Everybody used to sing You'll Never Walk Alone. I know football fans will say, no, absolutely. Pretty much everybody did. And, you know, the Saints go marching on, or when the Blues go marching. You know, there was some generic football songs, but Keep Right On was always really pretty much for Birmingham City, and it's always been synonymous with the Blues. I believe Ipswich had a period where they tried to nick it, didn't they?
Yeah,
but that soon died off. So I'm not too sure on the dates of Ipswich, and again, singing the Blues, Birmingham nicked that from Ipswich and trying to get their own back, I guess. But yeah, let's go back to the war years, because again, lots of records during those wartime years get eroded and taken and scrubbed off, didn't they? But we still played football during the war. I mean, I've not got any facts or figures to hand, but and again, I was far too young. I wasn't born until 1964. But there is a wartime programme of Birmingham City, and back in the 20s as well, Birmingham. Didn't they go to Barcelona in the Alexander McClure, I think, was the captain? I think it was the 20s, and Barcelona were that frightened that they didn't want to come out in the second half. Wouldn't happen now, would it?
No.
And Fairs Cup finals, of course, we got the two.
Yeah,
we played against
and also there's an inaugural floodlit match at Blues against, and that was against Borussia Dortmund. And I saw a picture the other day of the crowd. Oh my God!
We used to get really, really big. But all football clubs used to get big crowds in those days. I mean, there was no Sky TV. There was pretty much bugger all else to do. So you'd turn up and go and watch your game of football. Of course, now the kids have got a multitude of things to do. And, you know, the game isn't the working class game that it once was and grew out of the heartlands of the working hubs. You know, the factory workers had come out of the factory and go down. Well, the factories are all closed. So, you know, it is a different landscape. So, you know, back in the day, I mean, the flat caps as well, of course, the cloth caps. You know, it was a very, very different time. I mean, I love seeing pictures of the old days, no matter what football club it is, but seeing all those fans packed in. And, of course, when you were a kid, you used to get passed down to the front because you couldn't see bugger all. No. And you couldn't see bugger all as a kid. I remember going down there as a baby, the old man in the early 70s, and I used to have to wedge my foot on the crash barrier. There was a little lip on there. I mean, my foot was numb by the end of the game, but it was the only way that really you could see. You'd have to put your head through the crowd, and you'd see a little bit, but it was the atmosphere, wasn't it? And it was being part of the game.
Yeah, it was the occasion, wasn't it? It was
absolutely.
It was where you had to be on a Saturday, really.
Hot dogs, tea. I don't think we even had coffee in them days. We had Bovril, we had pies, you know, and the programmes would be sold at at shops as well. You know, we used to have a bag of pear drops.
Didn't you? You had the man with the tea urn as well going round as well.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you'd have all that, and the programme seller would come round. And good luck trying to get him you know, during the game.
Yeah. Just go back to the same year. Was it the same year, 56, when Blues played in Europe, being the first club to compete in the European competition? I think it was an invited competition, really, wasn't it? I think.
Well, the Intercities Fairs Cup was an invitation cup back in the early days of the 50s when Birmingham used to host trade fairs, as it still does now.
Yeah.
London also used to host trade fairs, as did many other cities around Europe, and that was the concept of the Intercities Fairs Cup. I believe Birmingham were the first British team that played in Europe. Hibernian were the first Scottish club, and I think they were round about the same time.
I think
Birmingham
the records,
City Fairs Cup.
The records have us as the first English club, so whether Hibs got in there first, I really don't know.
I think there was round about the same time, if I'm absolutely honest, without looking at Google, because you can these days. I mean, back in our day, you used to have to look in an encyclopedia or get your programmes out. Now they're all full of bloody adverts, and you don't learn nothing from a programme. And forget turning on the radio, because that's just a pile of it. Back in the day, we used to have Tony Butler, who'd educate us. We used to have proper radio stations, didn't we?
Yeah, we reached the final in 1960. And
Blues played in two finals. They played against Barcelona, and they played. I believe Sebor, the Hungarian, played at St Andrews in one of the legs. Barcelona versus Birmingham City. Again, just to say Birmingham and Barcelona in the same sentence, playing a match together. It is quite
don't
incredible.
Sound right, does it? It just don't
No,
sound
it
right.
doesn't. But again, those were the days, wasn't they? When thanks for the invitation, guys. We really appreciate it. But didn't the first one? Wasn't the Barcelona final? Didn't it take something like about 12 months to actually fulfil all the fixtures, and then you played in the final, if memory serves me right? And while we're talking about the history, let's not forget 1963, because that was the first time that Birmingham City won a cup, a two-legged affair, when we beat Aston Villa 3-1 and drew 0-0.
So very little video evidence of that as well, is there? There's nothing. Is
No,
there?
it really happened. I mean, there's
I know
no
it really happened.
evidence. It did happen.
I believe you.
Well, again, you look at the kids today. They've got YouTube, and they've got all the archives from Sky that invented the game in 1992. But prior to that, of course, even up to blimey, really. Sky, I mean, although we do dig Sky and have a pop at them, they were the inventors of live football, because before Sky, the only games of football that you'd see live on the TV, it was just starting before Sky. I think ITV may have broadcast one or two games as a kind of test pilot thingy. But it was the FA Cup and then the home internationals, England versus Scotland, and that was pretty much it for live games of football on your television set. And of course, Birmingham not being one of the big clubs, as much as the fans like to think that they are, they're not. No. They wasn't on live TV very much. And I suppose as a consequence, when you're watching Match of the Day and you're seeing all these big clubs, that's why, the likes of Liverpool and Manchester United and, sides like that command such great support, because they were beamed all around the world with Match of the Day that, of course, started in 1964. Phil Chisnell for Liverpool kicked it off at, August 1974. 64. There you got that one right. The year I was born.
Yeah. What would you say was your most memorable game?
Most memorable or favourite? I think
I suppose you could say favourite. Favourite, memorable. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You've got to say, I suppose, it'll either be the first game back in the Prem against the Villa. The September Monday night. The atmosphere, absolutely electric. Obviously, before that, you had the Ipswich semi-final when the ground first shook, so to speak. You could feel the Tilton bouncing as everyone jumped up and down, and obviously little were we to know the sign that it was to come all these years later.
Literally.
Yeah. But that Villa night, because the atmosphere at work, the build-up, the banter, and then of course obviously to come away with a 3-0 win, just phenomenal. And I was actually the only one where I was working who got that week booked off work as holiday, but I still went in on the Tuesday with an air horn, burst through the door, blasting it, just to obviously let the Villa fans know.
What's your earliest recollection of going to St Andrews?
Well, my first game was the last game of the season, 1979-80. We needed a point against Notts County at home to get promoted to the top flight. So great first match to go to. It was my birthday in and around that time. So my mum had written to the club and asked if I could meet some of the players beforehand. So I was taken past the massive crowds before the game, in through the gates, met Billy Wright, Colin Todd, Joe Gallagher, Jim Smith. Got some great photos from the day with my little brown flares on and my slip-on shoes and my blue scarf. And it was 3-3. We got the point we needed. Typically didn't do it in easy fashion and win straightforward 4-0. It was a end-to-end sort of game, and then all the fans running on the pitch at the end. It's just that excitement and that buzz, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it.
Born.
Yeah. What a great year.
It was a good year, wasn't it?
From you being born, man.
Yeah, it was a good year, wasn't it?
I suppose let's move on to what a lot of people call the glory years, the 70s.
Were they?
Don't you think so? Don't you think so? I mean,
do you know what? I did. Yeah. They were the halcyon days of Birmingham City.
Definitely, yeah.
But I wouldn't actually call them the glory years. I mean, as you know, I go to a lot of football events and. You know, I look at the 70s, and we do a Legends of the 70s podcast, so I look quite deeply at the 70s. And when you look at Wolverhampton Wanderers got to the UEFA Cup final in 1972, they got to the League Cup final in 1974, in 1980 they got to the League Cup final. Aston Villa got to the League Cup final in 71, in 75, and 77. You look at West Bromwich Albion at the back end of the 60s and the 70s. The Albion were relatively successful. Albion nearly won the league in 78, 79. Very unlucky, the big freeze come and really stopped them because they didn't have undersoil eating. Liverpool did. Aston Villa almost won the treble in 76, 77. Andy Gray won both Young Player and Player of the Year. So, yeah, we were better in those days, but we still was probably fourth best in the Midlands. Yeah. So, and those were our halcyon days.
Yeah, I meant our glory days. I don't mean the glory days.
I think
they were a great decade. That was a great decade for Birmingham City.
I think it was a decade of hope for Birmingham City. Yep. I think it's fair to say that as a fan, you go and you would expect, at least at home, Birmingham City to win, no matter who they played, and we would give anybody a game at St Andrews. In fact, when Leeds were on that great run, that they come a cropper at Stoke City on the 29th game, they were trying to equal Burnley's record of 30 games unbeaten. And Birmingham City played, I think it was about the 9th of December in 1973. We played Leeds United. I think with 4 minutes to go, got an idea it was Joe Jordan scored the equalising goal, but Birmingham nearly stopped that run. Birmingham were a match for any team in those days. And if you look at the crowds, it wasn't uncommon for 50,000 to be there at St Andrews. In fact, 74, when they done the lap of honour for staying up against Norwich, there was 47,000 plus there. As a kid, I remember turning around to my dad and saying, "What's going on, Dad?" He said, "We're doing the lap of honour, son."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I thought we just stayed up." He said, "We did." He said, "Do we do that every time we stay up, a lap of honour? What would happen if we actually won something?"
I know, yeah. I can remember the cup game against Middlesbrough. I think it was about 40, probably about the same sort of crowd. 40.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
And I remember
1975, that was, wasn't it?
There was three of us, and we were crushed right down the bottom. right down the bottom against the barriers. And I remember the one lad that was with us went to the toilet, and of course we never saw him again.
Whatever.
ever.
What was he like at Cardiff?
He never made it back. And of course, most people used to go where they stood, really, didn't they? You know what I mean?
Well, you did. Your leg would get warm, wouldn't it, in the winter?
It was the Cop River, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, 1972 was a great year as well, because of course Birmingham City 71-72 got promoted, and we got to the semi-final of the FA Cup, which was the centenary FA Cup, which Leeds United ran out winners at Wembley, 1-0. Alan Clark scored the winning goal, and Billy Bremner was presented with the piece of silverware by the Queen, because it was the centenary. But even in those days, Leeds United feared Birmingham City, and that's fact.
Yeah.
Don Revie feared Gordon Taylor on the wing. And when Cardiff had played Leeds United in an early round, Scholar, he was captain of Newcastle the last time they won the FA Cup. He was manager of Cardiff, and 2 Johnny Giles goals knocked Cardiff out. Or he was telling Revie afterwards that, had he stopped Johnny Giles, that could have gone through and possibly got their hands on the FA Cup, because, of course, Cardiff, was it 1927, was the first team to take the cup out of England to Wales.
Yeah.
Well, Paul Trevelyan used to write for the Sunday People. He's a cartoonist, and I had the pleasure of Paul's company. And Paul was telling me it was a plan concocted by Don Revie and Jack Charlton. And what the Beaver, as he was called, Revie called him the Beaver, what his job was, get an interview with Scholar, write it down word for word, and this is what you're going to say to him, and then print it. The way to stop Leeds United is to stop John Giles. Freddie Goodwin must have looked at that, but Freddie played at Manchester United while John was there, and Freddie was a former Leeds player as well, so Freddie should have known, but the plan worked. Gordon Taylor was dropped, George Smith come in, flooded the midfield, and as soon as the Beaver turned up at Hillsborough, Don Revie said, Leeds are 1 up. We've won the game. The plan has worked. The Beaver, well done. Of course, that wouldn't happen today. It would be, deemed corruption.
Yeah.
But that's what they used to get up to in the 70s.
Yeah.
And that is a true story because it comes from the Beaver's mouth, and it's also in the Beaver's book.
Yeah.
So yeah, Don Revie.
What a talent, the Beaver as well, I must say.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely incredible.
Oh, I mean, he's font of knowledge. It's a shame he wasn't a Blues fan. You could have had the Beaver on instead of me. He'd have been far more fun and far more intelligent. But yeah, an absolute font of knowledge. I think I got my first word in after 40 minutes on that podcast.
No, I listened to it. Yeah, fantastic.
No,
yeah, brilliant.
Tremendous.
Let's not bypass our fantastic forward trio of the 70s as well. Latchford, Francis and Hatton.
Our Trinity.
What a forward line.
I don't think Birmingham has ever before and will after have a better trio than Francis, Hatton and Latchford. Now, I know Wonder Boy, Superboy, TF, however you want to term him and talk about Trevor, the greatest Birmingham City player ever to wear the shirt, in my humble opinion, and the great Bob Latchford, who scored tons of goals, and I think it was the 1978 season, he scored 30 goals for Everton, which was only half of what Dixie Dean scored, of course, in the 20s, but back in 1978, 30 league goals was a lot of goals. Yeah. But Bob got sold, sadly, and if I'm absolutely honest, I don't think they've ever replaced Bob. And they certainly haven't replaced Trevor. But the unsung hero was Bob Hatton. And I think he's the one that does get left out when we eulogise about Francis Hatton and Latchford. And without Bob Hatton, I don't think Trevor Francis and Bob Latchford would have been able to do what they did. He was like the glue that put them together and made and gelled and just made it work. Because it was Francis, Atton, Latchford, and again, let's not forget Gordon Taylor on the wing, because Gordon was a tremendous winger. But I believe we bought him from Bolton Wanderers, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think it was 1971 we bought Gordon Taylor.
Yeah.
The tremendous winger Gordon Taylor was. So when we always talk about Francis Atton and Latchford, Gordon Taylor always does get forgotten, but he wasn't forgotten by Don Reeve in 1972, of course. And then that year in 72, the year we got promoted at Orient when there was bomb scares, pitch invasions, and all kinds of stuff that happened. And we didn't even play Millwall. It was Orient at Brisbane Road, where they tried to get the game called off and all sorts. Again, it was Millwall, but the game was Birmingham versus Orient at Brisbane Road. Yeah. The 70s, everything happened in the 70s. The greatest decade of football, in my opinion. And you're right. I wouldn't say so much the glory days, because I think it'd be very difficult to define the glory days for Birmingham, because glory is something you kind of define with winning things, and we've never won anything apart from a Leyland Daff and an auto windscreen.
Yeah, well, let's stick with Halcyon then.
Yeah, I think Halcyon, and it's a lovely word, isn't it, Halcyon?
Fantastic.
I love that word, Halcyon.
But my most memorable game, I think, has got to be Man United, when we played Man United, and to watch Georgie Best play on live, and Bobby Charlton, and it was just that was just cracking,
That would be around about 72.
72, is it?
Why Birmingham City? Is it sort of like a family thing where you had to do it because your mum or your dad or they dragged you along?
My dad was born in Small Heath. He always went down the Blues. I was born, would you believe, in Aston.
Really? Right. This ends the
and I was
conversation.
born up in Aston, where I used to go from there down the Blues. I just loved it. Listening to Harvey Andrews singing all good old Brummagem and all that sort of stuff. So it just. I've only ever been to Villa for any cup ties that's been out there.
I guess I'm going to get probably the same answer to this question on a lot of these interviews. Is that what would you say is the main thing that other clubs, other fans get wrong about Birmingham City?
It's the fact that we had a reputation of old of being the thugs of football, and all we cared about was actually going to a game and having a fight. Sadly mistaken by a lot of the teams, because to understand the true passion that goes not just behind the way that was, the way the Zulus were, but the way we are now as a group, it is to be understood. It has to be understood by everybody. I actually feel that without that, we perhaps wouldn't be as renowned as what we are now. A little bit of that terrible times has helped us now to be known as a club, sometimes in the wrong way. Other times now you start hearing fans talking about, whoa, the passion, the away following that you guys get is amazing. I don't think we'd have had that if we hadn't have been in the situations of old. But also the fact that those people that were involved were part of the crew and the troublemaking at the time, turned themselves around and actually became known as people of the city. So Barron's and Patterson is that classic example. Somebody who turned being that bad side of things into such fantastic work that he completed before his sad passing. That for me is what it's about.
The 80s were pretty much Am I right in saying a pretty awful decade for Blues?
I think it was a turbulent decade, wasn't it? It was the first time that I was aware of the Gypsies curse. We'll take more care of you, Saunders, Saunders.
Yeah.
And then the Villa fans shouted, you must be fucking mad, Saunders, son. Because that was Ron's first game. I mean, on the 9th of February, he walked out on Aston Villa in the middle of their wonderful European Cup winning campaign. And the next time that you've seen of Saunders, he turned up as the manager of Birmingham City.
Yeah.
That first game, of course, was against Aston Villa, and the last piece of the jigsaw with the team that he built at Aston Villa, Peter, with a former Birmingham City player, scored the winning goal for Villa. You couldn't make it up, could you?
You couldn't.
Football is romantic. It's almost as though it's written in the stars. There's so many things that happen in football that you turn around and you say to your friend, you couldn't make that up, but it happens in football.
Good manager.
But they were. Well, I think he was at Villa. It didn't quite happen at Birmingham. It certainly went from bad to worse when he went and managed at the Albion. So, he managed all three Birmingham teams in the space of about, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. Did Ron Saunders. But, he adopted a very different policy at Birmingham. When you look at Saunders and, I think that Ron Saunders, the more that I'd listen to the Villa lads, because I am a football fan, I'm a Blue supporter, but I'm a football fan. The man was an absolute genius. He built 3 teams, if you like, at Villa, and 2 of them in the image of each other in heads. He did really the first one and just developed the first one. But he never went back to a club and bought in players at Villa. He did at Birmingham. He went back to Villa because they had a really good youth team. I believe under Blakey, I think there's Mark Jones. They won the FA Youth Cup, I think. And Saunders looked at that and thought, I can get some value from these kids. And I think at Birmingham he had to balance books. So a lot of probably the more highly paid players, because Jim Smith had a great team. In fact, I would say Jim had the last best Birmingham City team that I've seen, and to this day is my favourite Birmingham City manager, and those players my favourite ever Birmingham City team. We had the likes of Langan and Mark Dennis, we had Joe, Colin Todd. No, Hoppy come a little bit after. Keith Birchin, who come again slightly earlier. Keith come in obviously 1977 and played with Trevor, but Jim was the manager in those late 70s and then early 80s. I think did he come in 1979? Pretty much his first job, he had to sell Trevor Francis, and then lasted till 1982. So he was there probably 2.5 years. But I think he made a great impact at Birmingham. Brought some fabulous players into the team, and some of the young kids coming through as well. In fact, Jim Smith signed Browne Little from Aston Villa. He'd met Browne in a taverna in Portugal.
Oh, maybe you're telling me this.
Yeah. He asked Browne, he says, well, what do you want? He said, well, I want that, and that. I mean, Browne didn't tell me exactly because, these things are private and only him and Jim are privy to it. Yeah. And Jim said, yeah, okay, you got it. He went and had his medical and he failed it, got a bad back.
Yeah.
He went back to Aston Villa, told the players what Birmingham City were willing to give Browne Little, and they were all knocking on Saunders' door asking for a pay rise. So Birmingham must have been paying some wedge. And of course, Frank played for us in those days under Jim Smith. Again, I'd heard the story that they signed Frank Worthington over a bottle of whiskey, and Jim, after the signing, looked back and thought, I've just signed someone that drinks more whiskey than me. But Frank, what a lovely man as well. I've had the pleasure of Frank's company on a few occasions, and he certainly never forgot me, because he must have been the greatest actor in the world if he was just pretending. He was a genuine, lovely man, and what a player. Fabulous football player. In fact, when he scored the 2 goals against Nottingham Forest, and we got to call them Nottingham Forest, not Notts Forest, they get really angry when you say Notts Forest.
Did they?
Keith oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Keith Birchin said, I ain't seen those before, big man. He said, where they come from? And Frank turns round to Keith and said, I bring them out for special occasions. And, you know, he scores a brace against the European champions and the great Peter Shilton in goal. But and again, with Frank, you know, you look at these players, and I adored Frank Worthington. He was born on the same day as me, 16 years before I was born. But Keith told me a story of when they played away at Charlton, and they were coming off the pitch at half time, and he felt a lump of mud hit him on the back of the neck, and he turns around, it was Frank Worthington. He said, why didn't you pass? He said, what do you mean? He said, well, why didn't you pass? He said, well, I nearly scored, I hit the bar. He said, yeah, but you've been scoring a few. I ain't scored for ages. I'm a bit low on confidence. And Keith turned around and said, well, you're Frank Worthington. Everybody loves you. And again, you don't know these things until the players tell you. And it was a great story, and it just proves to me that no matter how brilliant a player is, they still have that self-doubt at times. But I never doubted them as a kid when I watched Birmingham play in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, under the Bald Eagle, Jim Smith. I felt we could beat it. But if we went back to 73, we got beat 3-4 or 4-3 because it was Liverpool at home 4, Birmingham City away 3. And that was our match of the day. And that was, I think Bob Hatton had a goal disallowed that was miles onside. Yeah, one of the classic games of the 70s. And also a few years after, under Alf Ramsey, Birmingham, we beat Liverpool 3-2 at Anfield. And as Keith told me, we were 3-0 up, and we really pissed them off that day. And they got 2 goals back, and it was like the Alamo towards the end. But Blues on and won. And Sir Alf Ramsey, who went to elocution lessons when he took over the England manager's job, said to the boys, or certainly said to Keith at one time, "Oh my God, you nearly give me a fucking heart attack." And I says to Keith, "Yeah, I know the feeling, Keith. you boys have done that to Blues fans since 1870s,
Let's just move on to the late 80s, early 90s, mainly the early 90s.
Yeah,
would you say,
good.
Not good, but probably a fun time for a lot of people.
Can I just say, if Birmingham City is a tape recorder, say like, a video, a cassette that you stick in, the kids wouldn't understand that because you have these CDs now. But I suppose you can do the similar thing with the CD. Just fast forward it. Fast forward it. Go from that 86, 87, fast forward it to Wembley.
Quickly, as quick as you can.
Absolutely. Let's forget those years because they didn't really exist.
They didn't, no.
And, they kind of, ask Clarkey. Clarkey was around in them days, He lived through it, and I think Clarkey'd like to forget it as well. But no, they wasn't very good. In fact, I used to work at Birmingham 1984. 83, 84, round about that time. Billy Wright was playing for Birmingham, not the Wolves player, but the old Everton player. Martin Cull was there, Julian Dix. Julian used to stay with Browne, who I used to work for, Browne Rogers. He used to have a big house in Tennyson Road, and Birmingham City, lots of Birmingham City players stayed. When they come out of town, they stayed at Brian and Janet's house. In fact, Pat Van Den Houw was one of them. I met Pat Van Den Houw at Faces. I used to work at Faces for Brian, as well as the D Club. And I met Pat. He introduced me. Brian, here's Paul. Pat Van Den Houw. Do you know what the first thing Pat Van Den Houw said to me?
Who are you?
He said, "Who'd you fight for?"
Who'd you what?
Who'd you fight for? He said, "I'll fight for Millwall." He's a big Millwall fan. He was a right lunatic. Oh, crackers. And Mark Dennis, there's some wonderful stories about Mark Dennis. Again, Mark stayed with Browne and Janet, but Julian was the last one, and then when they moved over,
he was hard as well, wasn't he, Julian?
Do you know what?
Man.
Do you know something? He was one of the loveliest kids,
really,
that you could wish to meet. Julian off the pitch was so quiet, so polite, such a nice kid. In fact, I was working the one day in the D Club, and I was doing something. I've got to go over to Micheal's on the Coventry Road. I've got to pick something up. I don't know whether I had to go and get a key cut. It was something trivial. And Dixie come into the D Club, and I've gone, "Hello, Jules, how are you?" He said, "Oh, Paul." He said, "Oh, you know, Bundy he don't fancy me, he won't pick me." And I'm going, "Jules, don't worry about it, son. You know, that happens with footballers. Some managers don't fancy you for whatever reason." I says, "I'm going over to Micheal. You want to come in?" And I got a red Mini at the time. So Dixie come in the Mini, and we had a bit of a chat, and he went back, and I'd see him of a Friday when I'd go and have something to eat with Browne and Janet, because I'd be working at Faces. And then Julian left. I think he went to West Ham United after that. But I mean, what a tough tackler.
Yeah.
Hard as nails,
I'd
Jules.
scare the life out of you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the last time I saw Julian was at Brian's funeral. God rest him. But again, an absolute animal and a beast on the pitch.
Yeah.
Fabulous kid off the pitch. Great.
Yeah.
In fact, he used to go down to Sheldon Heath and train some of the kids as well. Julian did on a Friday night. Lovely lad.
We've had some hard men at Blues, haven't we, actually? In the last few decades.
Roger Hind, I would say,
Hind, yeah.
is the hardest ever.
Roger Hind, with his teeth out and coming towards you at 100 miles an hour, you tend to get out of the way, wouldn't you?
Well, I didn't realise how hard Roger Hind was until I attended a Birmingham City evening, and he was on the stage, and Kenny Burns was introduced, and he was on the stage. And Burnsy, I thought, was the hardest blues player that I'd ever seen. I mean, Burnsy, he'd growl, you'd run.
Yeah.
But Hindy had got Burnsy in his hand, and he was this little, whatever, you know, because when Burnsy's breaking through, Roger was, you know, one of the big guys. He was Bill Shankly's nephew, of course.
Yeah.
And you could see on the stage that Kenny had so much respect for Roger. And you could tell that Roger, even then, and he wasn't in the best of health, was such an immense man made of granite. So I would say, through what I've seen and from what I've heard, Roger Hind is the hardest player ever to play for Birmingham. But Mental Mickey was crackers and all, you know.
Yeah.
Mickey Harford.
Mickey Harford, yeah. Interviewed him not long ago. Yeah, he was a big
Jack
lump of a
Palance.
man, wasn't he?
Yeah, they used to call him Lanky. They used to call him Jack Palance. I mean, Mickey Harford. And I'll tell you another one who was a lunatic, Tony Coton.
Yeah.
TC was crackers.
Yeah, still a big
I mean, they used to. In them days, you got Uppy, Gailey, TC, Mickey Hassel.
Yeah.
There were a number of them. Blakey. They used to I used to work at Faces. They used to come to Faces. I mean, they run Birmingham.
They were the original crazy gang, weren't they, really?
Well, Mickey Harford, Uppy told me this. Because he was at Wimbledon, weren't he?
Yeah.
With the crazy gang.
Yeah.
Crazy gang.
I know this story. It's a great one, yeah.
Yeah. And he says to Vinny and Fashioner and that, he said, crazy gang, compared to Birmingham City, you lot of pussycats. That's exactly what Uppy told me.
Yeah.
You know? And they were crap. I mean, they liked the sauce as well, especially Uppy.
Yeah.
I used to lock up the bars at Faces, and Robert, many a time, he's crouched over that bar, absolutely bladdered.
Mick did say to us, he said that they were good at their jokes and stuff and pulling stunts and so forth, but they left him alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that they were. I mean, if you're doing Q&As and you're going to listen to the stories of the old days, Gailey, Uppy, Mickey Harford, Tony Coton, Blakey, and Mickey Hassel, I'd turn up. I'd pay £100 to listen to their stories, because them stories are infamous. And you know something? They're all true. All of them stories are true. Blakey. How hard was Blakey?
Yeah.
The original Zulu warrior.
Yeah.
Literally. He'd come from Villa. And I think in them days when Blakey had first come to Birmingham, got an idea, the tilt might have even been closed because of crowd disturbances and trouble. And cause I used to stand on the cop in them days, and the cop used to shout to Blakey, Zulu, Zulu warrior, and Blakey had put his fist up to the cop. And he was just loved.
Yeah,
he comes from Aston Villa.
But,
you know, and again, you see, they go, oh, they come from the Villa, we don't. But no, back in the day, you know, it didn't matter who you played for. As soon as you put the Blues kit on, you were a Blues player.
Exactly.
You know, I think the game has changed a little bit, not for the better, with the attitude of fans these days. But no, again, going back to hard men, what a hard man Noel Blake was. Definitely. And what a great Birmingham City player as well, Blakey was.
Let's just quickly move on to the 91.
Can I just say about Howie and an Alsatian and training ground? And I'm leaving it there. I'm not saying anything else. But that's another true story.
Oh, right, okay.
Oh, absolutely. Hoppy told me.
There's a whole podcast on Hoppy, isn't there, really? I mean, some of the things he's done. You couldn't broadcast a lot of it. Because he played for the Villa as well, so, yeah.
Yeah, he played for Villa.
Yeah.
I think it was Notts County away. And he went to take a corner, and he got his blue shirt on underneath his Villa top.
That's right.
And I could see it, and they were going balmy, the Villa fans. I mean, Robert, what a great lad.
Yeah.
I mean, again, a 1-to-1 with Robert Hopkins, fantastic. I'd do that with Hoppy because I think Hoppy was just great. He was a good footballer.
Yeah.
He was the original kind of like bad boy of Birmingham and Saunders, and you know he just stood for everything that Birmingham stood for in them days. But again, what I would say, what a great kid Hoppy is, great lad. Fantastic. Well, a lot of time for Robert.
Leyland Duff.
Yes. 1991, wasn't it?
Old Lou McCorry.
I was on the pitch at Brentford when Simon Sturridge scored the goal that took us to Wembley for the first time since 1956.
What?
So for more or less everybody that wasn't peeing themselves, they hadn't seen Wembley before.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember being there, and the police were saying, "Go home," and we were saying, "No, we ain't going home. We're just standing there singing, keep right on." And you know, Brentford. I don't think the Brentford fans could believe it. Birmingham were Blues were everywhere that night.
Yeah.
It was it was on B Sky B, the game.
Yeah.
My daughter, my youngest daughter, had been born probably a couple of weeks before that. Probably a couple of weeks, 6 weeks, maybe. And but no, you staying in and watching it B Sky B? No, I'm going to Brentford.
B Sky B.
I remember I mean, again, a great game. And then Wembley was a great occasion as well.
Yeah. Did you cry?
I know that no, football doesn't make me cry.
Yeah, I cried like a baby.
I think only really sentimental things make me cry with football. Like, you know, where, I don't know, say for instance, Roger Ryan would be saying something and he's next to passing away, and he's like Bertie Auld as well. I remember Bertie going and watching the team of 63. Bertie turned around to Gil Merrick, who was the manager, and he just said, "I'd just like to thank you, Gil, for giving me the opportunity to play for this great club, for me being able to put food into the mouths of my wife and my kids." Now, stuff like that made me cry. But not an actual game of football, no.
Yeah.
People make me cry, not games.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like crying in desperation on a number of occasions, let me tell you, but not tears of joy, no. I was quite happy. I just couldn't believe that Gailey could do that. I thought for the life of me that was, I thought it was Dennis Bailey that scored that overhead kick.
Dennis Bailey,
but he was a good player as well, Dennis Bailey.
Yeah, I've met him, Lovely man.
Terry Cooper again, another great manager of the 90s. Followed Lord Louis into. I mean, Lou Macari was loved, and then went off to Stoke, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a strange one that was, wasn't it?
Well, not really, because Blues hadn't got a pot to piddle in, and that was the problem. So, do you want to come to another club? You've got a little bit bigger budget, etc., etc. And you see, the thing is, fans all think that their club is the greatest, and every player would want to come and play for their club. But Birmingham were going through turbulent times. The Kumars had just taken over with their influence brand. I was going to have my taxi sprayed influence. This is how tight there was. I said, we don't mind, but will you pay for it? I thought you're having a laugh, ain't you? I thought, there we go. But I've got to say, I did pick up Samesh Kumar in my taxi. I knew who he was, and I said, I believe a family of Pakistanis have bought this football club now. I think they're going to run it into the ground, aren't they, mate? And you want to see his face? And I said, I'm only having you on. I know who you are. And to be fair, Samesh Kumar was in my taxi. He paid me off, and he sat in the back of my cab and was talking to me for ages. Yeah. For ages. He actually cared about football. Yeah, okay, of course he wanted to turn the dollar because that's what people get involved in football for. But he was a real football. I never met his brother, Ramesh, but I did meet Sanesh, and my opinion of him and Joan Hill that worked in the commercial departments in them days, I thought they were really, really good people. I liked them.
Did he leave you a tip?
I can't remember. It's a long time ago. I was just honoured to have the owner of Birmingham City and being able to have the ear. I've had the ear of lots of Birmingham City owners, being a former black cab driver, etc. Yeah. I mean, most of them have ignored me, but I've had their ear. But I did like Samesh Kumar. It was a shame that it was a BCCI bank. It went bust, didn't it? And they lost a lot of money, and then had to sell it. But in walks David Sullivan, and again, I had a great relationship with the Sullivan and Golds. And I have done with Edward. It's just Panu and the years of Carson Young, really. It kind of went a bit west and stuff, and things went on and things were said, and I was at Birmingham City Ladies, etc. And yeah, absolutely. But Sully, the Sullivan years, I think, again, you look back at those years, I think great years. David Sullivan done a lot of good for Birmingham City, as did David Gold and Ralph. There was the three of them. To be honest, I was never Karen Brady's biggest fan, but I got a lot of time for Sullivan. He always had time for me. I always felt that Brady didn't, but David Gold did, David Sullivan did, and I'll always thank them for that. So I look back at the Sullivan and Gold years very fondly. Possibly, when we're talking Halcyon, them just behind the 70s, in my opinion. And I think, manager Stevie Bruce done a good job for a couple of years. But,
let's not forget the Barry Fry era, which was fun.
Baz is crackers.
Oh, he's crazy.
I mean, he was crackers. Lovely bloke, but he was crackers. My finest memory of Barry was at what's that hotel in West Brom? They stay there. God, it might have been the Moat House at West Brom, and all the Blues players they were staying there. God knows why. A lot of them used to stay at the Cobden, but they were there against the Baggies and Blues. I think we won 4-2 at the Albion, and we had a great night. The players were there. Barry was there. Ed Steen, Halsey. They were phenomenal people. When you look at Barry Fry, he got time for everybody. Again, I knew Barry well.
And if he liked you, he'd sign you.
He nearly did. Seriously, he nearly did. He says to me, Paul, I need you for a reserve game. I says, well, tell me when it is, Baz, and I'll turn up with my boots. Because my lads were mascots.
All right.
And yeah, we were kicking the ball around. In fact, Tom Ross was there doing his BRMB and had me. That was, I think, the first time that I went on with Tom Ross, and I was talking because I was knocking the ball around and passing the ball and stuff. In fact, Steve, it was against Plymouth. Steve Castle came over to me. He said, "Do you want to play for us?" And then Barry Fry did say to me, "I'll give you a reserve game," but nothing ever come of it. But Barry wasn't actually joking. He was being deadly serious.
I honestly, I can quite believe it. I mean, if our mum would have been walking past at the same time, he would have signed her. So.
Well, I'll tell you another great story about Barry. This is how great a bloke Barry Fry was at Birmingham, and he still is. Birmingham played Bradford the season that we got promotion. They all had a right few quid to get championship, right, to win it. They had a right few quid. In fact, there was a bookie in Bedford that shop was boarded up when a certain player come back off holiday and phoned me up to see if I got a contact number for him. And there was another bookies up on the Wolverhampton New Road that pretty much went the same way. They had a right few quid on Birmingham City winning the league. So when they drew 0-0 against Bradford, the last home game at St Andrews, and I took the kids, Barry, he'd seen me before, and Barry says to me, "Paul, do us a favour. I want you to take Alan Jones was club secretary in them days. He lived over Walsall way. And Barry had paid me handsomely to do the job. So I said, Baz, I'll drop my kids off and then I'll come back. I'll take Alan home and so on. So we did. I turned back up at St Andrews and I've gone taxi for Alan. Alan's gone. Are you joking? Because they drew it was going to be the celebration and then we were all going to have a beer. Hence why they wanted a taxi back. So I've gone, well, where's Barry? Barry's gone. I said, are you joking? I've got to give him some money. He's already paid me to do this job. Anyhow, they said he might go up into the boardroom, Barry might. So there's me. I'm walking up the stairs into the boardroom, and there's Barry Fry sitting, having a beer. And he's like, come in, Paul. I said, Barry, I've got to give you some dough. He said, no, give me a pocket. And he said, I'm absolutely gutted. Why couldn't Claridge have scored that goal? And I wanted to win the league in front of all you blue noses and that. And I was serious. I was consoling Barry Fry because he was almost in tears. That's what it meant to him.
Really?
And I said, yeah. He was. He really, really cared, Barry Fry did.
Oh, yeah, I think he still does.
Yeah. And I says, blimey, anyhow, I said, I'm going back home, Baz. And I said, I ain't even got a fucking beer in my fridge. And Barry says, Lil, jump over that bar and pull some fucking beer out of the fridge there. and they gave me some beer and I went home and had a couple of beers. That's what they were like. Yeah. They were just fabulous, fabulous people. Lil Facillo, there was Owlsy, David Owls, Epstein, Barry Fry. They were great people. In fact, Harry Willis, I used to pick up lots of them because he went through that many players. They'd turn up at New Street Station, get in my taxi, and then I'd take them up to St Andrews. That's how I got involved in that Inside Story programme, through picking up James Cohen, who was the producer of the Inside Story documentary.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Okay. He nearly missed his train.
Yeah. And there's the Autoglass final that Barry took us to, the famous... Paul Tate.
The famous shirt. Yeah, the famous shirt. Tate swears blind. He just picked it out of the kit bag, didn't he? But I ain't having that.
Nah.
I mean, Tate was a mad blues, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You asked Devlin about Tate and that. He was a decent player. But again, I said it. Nutted Richardson, didn't he? In the League Cup game at Villa Park, wasn't it? When we went down to 10 men, if memory serves me right. But Paul was a decent player.
Yeah, Mad Blues, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Crazy.
His old man, isn't he?
Yeah, right.
They're all crackers. They're nice kids. They're all nice skins, aren't they? And Tate is a good lad, talented player. Yeah. Scored the goal, and it was the first golden goal, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
In 1995.
First, and
you take it off though.
Yeah.
Very nice.
it's much
Yeah,
better, it's much
1995, yeah.
Mm.
Carlisle United. Do you remember him? Michael Knighton. Was Michael Knighton, wasn't it?
Oh, was it the Man United chap?
Yeah. He was a
okay.
keepy-uppy bloke, wasn't he?
Oh, right, okay.
I challenged him on the Wembley pitch.
Yeah.
I wrote to him. I challenged him at the Wembley pitch to do a keepy-uppy competition.
Really?
Yeah, because he liked to do all these keepies up, but I would have beat him.
Right.
Because I could do thousands of them. I always used to be good at keepy-uppies.
That was your,
Unless
that
it
was
was
your
like
thing,
really...
basically.
My thing was football. As a kid, all I used to do was play with a stone, a can, my rolled up socks, a tennis ball, a football.
Yeah.
But, I could control the ball.
Yeah.
Come on, where are we? 1995.
Yeah, so 1995.
What happened after that?
Not a lot, was there? Apart from
The ground come down. The ground come down in 94, didn't it?
Yep.
And it's also coming down in 2022.
Yeah, a lot of investment. Yeah, that's right. No, it fell down in 2022. Yeah. So, a lot of investment came in from the Golden Sullivans at that time.
Yeah, it did. And so did Trevor Francis. It was always mooted, will Trev come back to Birmingham?
Yeah.
And in, obviously, 1997, 8th season, Trevor was back.
Yep.
And I think he'd done a decent job, didn't he?
I think so.
If you look at the Trevor years, he'd done okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Millennium Stadium.
he brought some bigger players, the likes of Gary Ablett and Barry Orne and Mike Newell. Okay, didn't quite happen for Mike Newell. Paul Furlong come in. So Birmingham was starting to spend a little bit of money. So we'd come through the doldrums, and we were starting to spend a little bit of dough. And we were on our uppers. So again, as I said earlier, next to the halcyon days, they were probably, where that grey cloud has always hung over, like Birmingham 9. It was the clouds were dissipating, wasn't they? And the rain had stopped, and the sun was shining for a bit. Yeah, most and then they sold us and went to West Ham.
So it's not memorabilia from a particular event. I've got my tickets from the cup final, but my picture when I went to an evening with Trevor Francis, and a picture of him signing my shirt. Without a doubt, that's just different level.
That probably runs on to the last question, which is, who was or is your favourite idol?
It's easy to say the obvious. I mean, both my kids' middle names is Francis. I've got a daughter and a son, so I got away with that twice, different spellings. So that would tell you one thing. My registration on my car is TF04KRO. So again, the initials of Trevor Francis on there.
There's a clue there.
There's a clue there. So clearly that's obvious. For me though, I like players that put it in and show a bit of class at the same time. So always admired Mark Ward. Mark Ward is a real favourite of mine. I don't think we've ever had a midfielder that's quite matched him since then. He's absolutely class. And on a personal basis, because he was also manager of Weymouth, my local club, and played and managed and scored lots of goals for Blues, Steve Claridge is a big favourite of mine. He had that one season where he scored 20 odd goals and was just phenomenal.
Although when I was little and before I went, and even though he played in my first game, obviously, because when you were little and Trevor Francis was the big name, and like I say, he did play in that first game I went to go to. So although he was the person you played as when you played your street football or whatever, I can't honestly say he was my first hero. I think my actual real first hero was Noel Blake, and then obviously since Blakey, I've had like Paul Tate and Martin Granger have been heroes, and obviously like Gary was when he came, because like you say, you never expected to find a World Cup winner.
Or is your idol?
Oh, it's got to be Trevor Rocky.
Trevor Rocky?
Well, yeah, he was good looking, wasn't he? And he got lovely legs.
Yeah, that beautiful black Blackbeard as well, didn't he? At
He
one stage,
did.
Blackbeard and he's
He did.
yeah.
And I used to be in his fan club, and they used to meet in above Burton's on the Stratford Road, or was it Country Road? Stratford Road, above Burton's, the shop, and occasionally he turned up, and yeah, I just loved him. He was funny, comical. He was a good player, team player, and his music as well. He used to.
Didn't he? He did sing a song. Didn't he? He had a good voice.
He had a song out, yeah, and
yeah.
I always remember, because I've recently did a little interview with Harvey Andrews, who sang Good Old Bromwich Up and Up.
Yeah.
And he told me a tale of when he was playing on the town hall with his friend Roman. I think he's somebody. There was two of them playing on the town hall in Birmingham, and as a special guest, they brought Trevor Rocky on. Well, he helped Trevor Rocky arrange all his music and bring that song out that Trevor Rocky did. And is it Only 'Cause We're Blue or something like that?
It is, yeah. It was, yeah. It's because we're blue.
Because we're blue, yeah.
Because we're blue.
Anyway, yeah. Harvey Andrews helped Trevor Rocky with that, and he says, and they was in the town hall having just a concert between themselves, and they brought him on as a special guest. Well, Trevor Rocky come walking on the stage with a guitar case, and Harvey thought, well, he can't play the guitar. Why has he got a guitar case? He can't play it. Anyway, he puts the case down on the stage, and he opens it, and he pulls out his blue scarf, and he's waving his blue scarf about there on the. He's quite a character, wasn't he? As well.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
One of my idols. Again, these questions, there's just so many.
They're random, aren't they?
They're random, but they're just so hard to answer.
Yeah.
But
that's the final question, by the way.
Okay, well, for me, I love Gabbie. I love the guys who won the Carling Cup, but there's one guy who stands out as sort of typifying us over the early 2000s, and that would be Jeff Horsfield. I absolutely love the Horse, and he just typified us. Everything about blues is typified by him. So yeah, it's got to be Big Jeff, number one fan.
I liked the original early teams, so the Nigel Gleghorns of the day for me were the ones that stood out. Obviously, being at that first game, John Gale, everybody will say it. For me, still the best goal I've ever seen scored at Wembley. So he became a standout person at that point in time. When you look at recent, I still stick by Steve Bruce. He took us to the promised land with a very small amount of money being spent. And not only that, he kept us there. So,
yeah. But no, we had a good old.
Years, yeah, we had the win at against Cardiff, didn't we? Yeah, get us up.
Yeah.
We had the Worthington Cup final, where we were robbed.
Yeah.
What a game that was! What an
bad referee decision.
Awful.
Bad referee decision.
Absolutely awful.
I mean, had Liverpool had been given that decision all day long, it's a penalty.
Yeah,
all day long. I mean, there's no consideration, and this is the thing. VAR has brought in, bringing it up to date to eradicate problems like that, and it doesn't, because the bigger clubs still get them decisions.
Yeah.
And Birmingham really were on the receiving end of that. In that, it was the Worthington Cup final, wasn't it? In those days,
it was Worthington Cup final. Yeah.
Because we had Worthingtons, it was Littlewoods, it was the Milk Cup. Yeah. I mean, it was known as a lot of different things. Yeah. Milk, I think, was the first one to sponsor it. But I prefer it just to be called the League Cup. It's very confusing.
Yeah, just call it the League Cup, yeah.
The League Cup and the Emirates FA Cup, it's the FA Cup.
It's the FA.
To get the sponsorship on our cup competitions.
So we continued a good spell with Stevie Bruce, I suppose, and to a certain extent with Alex McLeish, as well as winning that cup for us.
Well, I thought, I mean, okay, we won the Carling Cup. And it was a great day out, let's be honest. But,
fantastic day out.
That probably was McLeish's fault. Well, it was McLeish's fault. So let's be completely truthful. But he was a boring get, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one up front, he stunk the place out. He was really boring. I mean, Brucey towards the end of his days was a bit boring as well. But at least in Brucey's days, he brought in Christophe Dugarry. And what a mesmerising creature Dugarry was.
Yeah.
He used to just turn up and drool over him. And then, you know, he'd play football and you'd look at his football skills as well. But he just got everything, hadn't he? I remember Devlin telling me a story about when he was on the rowing machine, Dev, at the training ground, and Dugarry pops his head round the door and Brucey said, "Christophe, you're on here after Dev." And Christophe's gone, no, and walked out. And Dev says, "What's all that about?" And he says, "When you won the World Cup, Dev, you don't have to."
Yeah.
But
I often think about them days. I always think, I look back at that time and I think, how did we get him? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't know.
It still baffles me. Because he was a world class, not in the Tarantini bracket, but I mean, he was a world class World Cup.
No, he was a World Cup. He was a World Cup winner. Yeah. Dugarry. He was a fantastic football player. Okay, I think when we done the deal and he was a permanent signing, he got injured and he didn't do very good, and he ended up running a vineyard business in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
But what a player! And I think that Southampton game is arguably the greatest performance that I've ever seen from a Birmingham City player. Even Strachan said he influenced the referee. He just, when you say a player ran the show, Dugarry against Southampton that day, he ran the show. In fact, that was the first ever poem I wrote about a football player because I just thought he was fantastic. Yeah. He was just, you know, he looked like Jesus, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
You know, and we thought that he was the saviour. We thought he was the Messiah. Yeah. You know, he wore an Alice band. He made Alice bands look cool. I mean, that makes you laugh now. They go, Grealish wears an Alice band. What Dugarry did?
Yeah.
You know, Christophe was just, he had this language style, didn't he, that the ball had just come to him and it would stick.
It would glue.
You know,
it would glue.
It was just, you know, you'd watch him in, you know, the kickabout before the game. My eyes were transfixed on Dugarry. I used to be transfixed on Micheal Harris as well, you know.
Yep, it was a great player.
He rarely missed a target. He rarely missed the target, you know, when he shot. Shame that his knees were knackered because he could have been a really, really great blue striker for some time. But he was on loan from Chelsea, wasn't he? And, you know, his knees were absolutely knackered.
Yeah.
But Christophe Dugarry. And the only other player that I've been transfixed watching him was Trevor Francis. I used to watch Francis pull the ball down, and I used to think, how did he do that?
Yeah.
As a kid, you'd try it. And as an adult, I used to do that with Dugarry. Dugarry would do something, and I'd get the ball, and, you know, I used to run a kid's football team. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you know, kids, this is what you do. This is what you don't watch Dugarry. Anybody watch Dugarry? You know, and we had a player, a world-class player that we could watch, that we could learn and we could develop from. And that's why I think it's always important to have a successful team and have a team that tries to play football, get the ball down and play the right way, even if you don't win. Just be inspired, because I think that's what football is all about.
Yeah, I think it helps having a maverick player as well.
We love the Mavericks, don't we?
Oh, we do.
70s, our Mavericks. Yep. They showed us and taught us everything. Still are now, aren't they? You know.
Well, yeah. Well, when you're growing up, it's the Mavericks you remember. You do, don't you?
You remember.
The ones that stick out.
You remember football's finest times.
Yeah.
You remember those moments in a game where the player has changed the game and done something extra special.
Yeah.
And I think really, sadly, since 1875, there hasn't been enough of that down at Birmingham.
No.
But we have had the odd player of certain generations that's been able to do that. But Yeah, so the Dugarry years and the Bruce years, the McLeish years, and Carson Young, and then he gets put in prison. You couldn't write the script, could you?
Yeah.
We win our first cup, and I mean, okay, our first cup at Wembley, wasn't
it? Our first league cup.
It's our first cup at Wembley because we didn't,
apart from Leyland Duff, and
Again, I know what you're saying with them, and we've spoken about that, and it's great to win those, but they're just third division and fourth division cups. So as much as it was great to win them, they don't really count
at the time.
For me.
They did.
So, no, of course they did at the time, and it was great, and we loved the days out. We spoke about it. We still eulogise about it, but it was,
I know what you're saying.
After all said and done, a competition that only third and fourth rate teams could enter. This League Cup was open to everybody because it was a Football League Cup. Birmingham City won their first ever cup in a one-off game at Wembley Stadium, and then it went tits up.
Yes, it certainly did, yeah.
Incredible. It's incredible. Usually the building blocks for success is the League Cup. It was the building blocks of doom and failure for Birmingham. Almost every player worth his salt got sold, and Carson Young then gets put in prison, and Panu takes over. And it was just an unmitigating disaster, wasn't it?
Incredible. Well, a certain amount of success in Europe.
Had a good run.
Yeah, I think something to be proud of. I think it was a good run, wasn't it? With Chrissy Hughton,
Chrissy
Hughton, yeah.
I mean, I suppose Birmingham's finest hour in Europe in that run was Bruges, wasn't it? And, when Chris Wood scored that goal in front of all them Blues fans, and it was it was fantastic.
The 100th minute.
it was tremendous. But didn't Braga and some other team? There was should have been a stewards' inquiry when there was a ridiculous amount of goals scored, and Birmingham didn't make it through to the next round.
We didn't lose a game, did we?
I don't think so, if memory serves me right. We played Braga, we played Bruges, we played some other team that I can't really remember. But, great for Birmingham City to be in Europe. Jasper Carrott always used to say that, didn't he, in his sketch? Birmingham City will be in Europe next year if there's a war. So, for a period of time, Jasper had no material. Birmingham were decent. But then it went down and further down, and the gloom and despair covered over St Andrews.
And that's where we are now. Hopefully,
I suppose nothing ever changes, does it?
No,
really.
No. I think.
I mean, if you could start back in 1875 as a professional football club and win nothing from a major city, in 2012 we won something, but then capitulated. I mean, if you could run a football club as unsuccessful as Birmingham City, have all the trials and tribulations that Birmingham City have encountered, all the years of heartache for all the supporters of the said club, you couldn't have planned it any better. You couldn't have done it any better. There was always a loaded gun in that trophy room, in that boardroom, where we just get it out and shoot ourselves in the foot. It's incredible. You couldn't make it up. But there are many fans that have kept right on to the end of that road, and it's the hope that kills you. It was the hope that kept us alive back in the 70s. It was the hope and that belief, and now it's the hope that kills us. Because, for many football fans of a certain age, we've just seen it all.
And on that note, I'll be joined as we journey on, where we'll sing this song the boys in royal blue are often partisan. La la la, we will journey on. La la la, keep right on to the end of the road. Keep right on to the. Though the way be long, let your hearts beat strong. Keep right on to the end. Though you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode. With all our love, we'll be dreaming of, we'll be there at the end of